Sense is cooking. Amadwa, Panuel Jerusalem, stand and face Jerusalem. Blessing of the Sabbath. Barakata Yahweh, Bashem, Yahweh Shai, Asherah, Nathan Lanawa, Ashabath, Bashalawam, Tawada, Aman. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the Sabbath and peace. Thank you, so be it. The Aliyah Ma'ar Shariah Machad, Psalms 121. Anya Harayam Mayim Ya Oh Harayam Mayan Yabawa Izoria Yabawa Mayahawa Shai Shemayam Warataza La Yanathan Lamawat Regalia Yala Yanawam Shashwamarka Hana La Yanawam Wala Yashan Shashwamar Yashabala Yahweh Shamaria Yahweh Tazalia Ayub Yawamam Hashamash La Hakaya Wayarak La Balayala Yahweh Yashamaria Makab Ra Yashamar Napasha Yahweh Yashamar Abalakya Wabawa my fa will aid I will Basham Yahweh Shai for what Aman.
Psalm 121. I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil, shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth even forevermore. Amen.
Amen. Shemaiah Sharela, Hero Israel. Shemaiah Sharela, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad. Shemaiah Sharela, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad. Shemaiah Sharela, Yahweh, Eloheinu, Yahweh, Echad.
Deuteronomy 6:4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord.
Amen. Tapala Yahweh, the Lord's Prayer. Abiyanawa Shabbat Shemayim Kodash Hayya Shamka Yahweh Malakwaf Kab Taba'ar Ratazawan Kab Hayya Aisha Barataza Kab Shemayim Natamlanawa Lakham Yawam Zad Wasalaknawa Kabawat Nawa Kasalaknawa Kabawat Yanawa Wala Abiyarnawa O Nasayawan Abal Hawashinawa Murai Kaya Laka Hamalakwa Wa Allah wa Thaparath Wa Walam Aman.
Matthew 6:9. After this manner, therefore, pray he, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Amen. Aisharamatazu, the Ten Commandments. La'ab Yahayab Lakab Alahayim Akarim Alapanyat La'ab Thaishad Lakab Pasog Wala'ab Thaibadam La'ab Talakwaka Shamwab Yahweh Alahayaka Lashawak Zakar F Hayawam Hashabath Lakodashwad Kabad Abiyaka Wa Amaka La'ab Daratazak La'ab, Tana'ab, La'ab, Taganab, La'ab, Tainad, Shakur, La'ab, Tachmad, Ko, Asherab, Lara'ika, Aman.
Exodus 20:2. I am the Lord thy power, which have brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them, nor serve them. For I, the Lord thy God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me, and showing mercy unto thousands of them that love me and keep my commandments. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain, for the Lord will not hold him guiltless that taketh his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shalt thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy son, nor thy daughter, thy manservant, nor thy maidservant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that in them is, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Honor thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy power will give to thee. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness against thy neighbor, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's house, thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, nor anything that is thy neighbor's.
Aman. Yeshua, be seated. Miracle like Elijah did for the woman. Barakateh Hawa by Shimi Hawashai, Asheranathan Nawa Pari Agapen Thwada Aman, Lai Hawa by Shimi Hawashai, Af Yasher Allah. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, that gives to us the fruit of the vine. Thank you, so be it. To Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, with Israel. Ahmad Panua Yerushalayim, Standard Page Jerusalem. Barakatah Yahweh, Haggadah, Rakawam, Abiyah, Wanawa'eh, Aliyawan, Malak, Shao, Shamayim, Warataza, Wako, Tabariam, Kayayam, Wagam, Hamashiach, Mayahawe, Arawanawe, Ahabnawe, Hapala, Yawaitaza, Yahawisha, Zakarnawe, Yahawe, Baratazawan, Ainka, Yasha'ala, Izarnawe, Bana, Wasap, Yasha'ala, Au, Nanawe, Yam Yam, Aifa, Kayawamyam, Makwadam, Babakusha, Shalak, Mike Allah, Watazawadak, Alahayam, La, Maganawa, Raparnawa, Washama, Elnawa, Baikwo, Shalak, Haroka, Shao, Yahawashai, Lanawa, Lalamagnawa, Rabiam, Kakama, Thabawana, Wada Aif, Shao, the Barka, Basham, Yahawashai, Thawada, Thamyad, Waiwalam, Maman. English translation. Blessed are you, Yahweh, the great, merciful, mighty, terrible, most high power, King of heaven and earth and all things living, and also the anointed from Yahweh, our Lord, our friend, the wonderful counselor, Yahweh Shai. Remember, Yahweh, favorably your people Israel. Help us build and gather Israel, most high, we beg you. right now, like the days of old. Please send Michael and the righteous powers to protect us, heal us, and watch over us. Mainly send the Spirit of Yahweh Shai to us to teach us much wisdom, knowledge, and understanding of thy word. In the name of Yahweh Shai, thank you. Always and forever, so be it. Repeat the Hebrew only. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the law. Barakata Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Natan Lanawa, HaTawarat. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us light to see. Barakata Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Natan Lanawa, Awar, Lara Awaf. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the ram's horn to call the people. Barakata Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Natan Lanawa, Quran, Hayo, La Korah, Ha'aim. Blessed are you, Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai that gives to us the olive oil to anoint Israel. Barakata Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahweh Shai, Asherat, Natan Lanawa, Hasheman, Zayeth, Lamashak, Yasha'alab, Yeshabra. Be seated. Okay, so Shalom Yasharallah. So Shalom everyone here in Philly. Shalom everyone watching us on live stream, and Shalom everyone listening in on teleconference. Welcome to Hayasharallah Kanas, or the Congregation of Israel, where we teach that the descendants of slaves, as well as the indigenous peoples found throughout the Americas and the Caribbean, make up the southern and northern kingdoms of the 12 tribes of Israel. And that as a people, we fall into a lower state politically, economically, even religiously, because we broke the laws of God found in the Bible, given to us by Moses. And they become out of this lower state that we fall into by turning back to these commandments we broke by following Jesus Christ as our example. And one way we do that is by keeping the Sabbath holy from Friday sundown to Saturday sundown weekly to the best of our ability. And as our particular branch of Christ does, we go into a Sabbath service. Today's Sabbath service will be going back to the Apocrypha. If you didn't notice already, we alternate between Old Testament, New Testament, and the Apocrypha as far as sections of the Bible. So we did a New Testament last week, so we got the Apocrypha this week, and we left off in First Esdras 4 and 5 about 3 weeks before, which means now we're going to go into the next two chapters, which is First Esdras 6 and 7. So First Esdras 6 and 7 is going to be our reading for today. My name is Nabia Zerbabal. I had the distinct pleasure of going through the service with you guys today. All thanks to the Most High in Christ by way of the Holy Spirit. And you can write down for your notes that according to the Gregorian calendar, it would be May 13th, 2023. But then according to the solar lunar calendar that we use as Hebrews, we know it actually would be the second month and the 24th day. Remember, Thursday night we celebrated the Day of Simon, which is the second month and the 23rd day, which means once the sun set Friday night, it became the 24th day. So we're still in the 24th day. And when the sun sets today, we'll be in the 25th day. So as we go through First Esdras, what I'll do is give you scriptures and like sections of scriptures that parallel with First Esdras 6 and 7, namely Ezra chapters 5 and chapter 6, at least parts of those chapters. You'll see a lot of similarities between the two. And then there are even certain historical references in the scriptures that we're going to read in First Esdras 6 and 7 are going to point to as well. So we'll touch on those verses too. So let's start off in First Esdras in the Apocrypha. And remember, Esdras is just the same as Ezra. It's translated from different languages, hence the spelling's a little different. And we're going to see that when it comes to certain names of persons and places when we go throughout the Apocrypha, not just in Esdras, but in the Apocrypha in general. You'll see names of people and places be spelled a little bit different because it's translated from a different language, but it's still referring to the same figure. And sometimes you'll see this in Chronicles too, as we go through Kings and Chronicles. When we get there, because we're still in Samuel's, you'll see where certain figures might be referred to a name, and then somewhere else they'll be referred to again, but then by a surname. So, don't be taken back by that either. Sometimes that happens too. So you may say, oh, it's talking about somebody else, but no, it's just another name they went by. Because you've had that throughout the history of the scriptures, right? Where you have a person that has one name, but they also go by another name too. Once you read it in a context, you can say, oh, okay, they may use a different name, but it's talking about the same person. So First Esdras, put my bookmark back on 6. I was on 7. Let me go back to 6 real quick. So First Esdras chapter 6 and verse 1 reads, so remember where we left off last time, First Esdras 5. We read about those that are part of the cabinet of Darius, who was the new ruler over the Medo-Persian Empire. He's only been in power, this particular Darius, for over a year. So we're in the second year of his reign, as we're going to see when we read this first verse. But those of his cabinet were pretty much tattletale on us, telling the king, Darius of the Medo-Persians, that, oh, they're going back to Israel to rebuild. Are they allowed to do that? Should they do that? To try to stop and hinder us from rebuilding. Because remember, when you read the blessings and curses in Deuteronomy 28, if we're following the commandments, right, we have rule over ourselves, right? And we have eventually rule over the other nations too, which way the Most High intended it. But if we don't keep God's commandments, the Most High will flip that, where he'll allow a nation to come up and then take us as captive. It talks about us being the head and them being the tail when we're blessed. But when we're cursed due to our disobedience, the nations are the head and we're the tail, right? They're the lenders and we're the borrowers, as opposed to us being the lenders and them the borrowers, right? So the power dynamic shifts. So this is the process of us coming back into our own power. So it only makes sense that the other nations would try to hinder that, right? Because, they have a lot of success when we're under them and helping them become richer, right? By working for them instead of the other way around. So this is First Esdras chapter 6 in verse 1. It reads, now in the second year of the reign of Darius, Aggeus and Zacharias, the son of Addo, the prophets prophesied unto the Jews in Jewry in Jerusalem in the name of the Lord God of Israel, which was upon them. Right? So now don't be taken back once again by these spellings. That's why I gave that disclaimer earlier. These Aggeus and Zacharias are the same as what they call the minor prophets, right? That's what the scholars refer to as the minor prophets. Let us say they're any lesser than what they call major prophets, namely referring to, we would go in the Old Testament, the first 4 prophets, which are Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, Daniel. They refer to them as the major prophets. And the other 12 as minor. I think it's more so just a matter of how much they may have written that we have to reflect on as far as why they call them minor. But they all were following the Most High and were showing the Most High's will so that they could write it down. So they're all major as far as we're concerned. but you'll see the scholars refer to them as minor, just given the length of what they had to write down. So let's get Aggeus, which is just another spelling for Haggai, chapter 1 and 1. We'll just read the intro, the first parts of both of their letters, so you can have an idea of them and what their mission was as they were contemporaries with Israel at this time, namely Zerubbabel and Jesus, who were pretty much the head of the house of David and the head of the house of Aaron at this time, representing for those two major bloodlines for the wave of Israel going back into the land to rebuild, coming out of the Babylonian captivity, and then after that, the Medo-Persian captivity, since they're the ones that took us over after the Babylonians did. So this is Haggai, not too far, chapter 1. Good. I'm just going to read from 1 down to 6. So Haggai chapter 1, in verse 1, it reads, in the second year of Darius the king, so same time frame, in the 6th month, in the first day of the month, so this is like end of the summertime, came the word of the Lord, or Yahweh, by Haggai the prophet unto Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel, governor of Judea, and to Jeshua, which is the same as Jesus, right, son of Josedek the high priest, saying, right? That's where you get Joshua from, or in the Hebrew, Yahushua, right? That's how you pronounce that name. Verse 2, thus speaketh the Lord, or Yahweh of hosts, saying, this people say, the time is not come, the time that the Lord's house should be built. Then came the word of the Lord by Haggai the prophet, saying, is it the time for you, O ye, to dwell in your sealed houses, and this house lie waste? Now therefore, thus saith the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. Ye have so much and bring in little. Ye eat, but ye have not enough. Ye drink, but ye are not filled with drink. Ye clothe you, but there is none warm. And he that weareth earneth wages are put into a bag with holes. Right? So we oftentimes use this at camp, even in this context nowadays, to get our people to realize why they're like running in circles when they're trying to move forward in their life, trying to improve themselves, trying to improve their community, but seem like they're just kind of running in circles, not getting anywhere. It's because we haven't considered our ways, in that we're not putting the Most High first. And with the context here, we see that it's really talking about putting the Most High first. When how is it that we have our houses set up now as we go back into the land, but we haven't taken care of the Most High's house, right, as a priority, right? And we even see that sentiment with David, as we read in Samuel's, doing the same thing as far as him building a house and saying, what about the Lord's house, right? How's it I dwell in the house of cedar, but now the Lord doesn't have a house. So the Most High then communicated back then to David to say, well, since you fought many wars and you shed much blood, I'm not going to have you do that. You just gather the raw materials, but I want to have your son, who's going to be a man of peace. As you're a man of war, he's going to be a man of peace. I'm going to commission him to build my house. But you just make preparation for him, and he'll be the one to actually do it. Also, Zechariah, chapter 1, I'll read the first couple of verses there too, since they were, like I said, contemporaries with each other and prophesied during this time that we're in 1 Esdras 6. It says, in Zechariah chapter 1, in the 8th month, in the 2nd year of Darius, came the word of Yahweh unto Zechariah, the son of Berechiah, the son of Iddo the prophet. This was spelled a little different in the Apocrypha, but it's the same as Iddo. Here it's spelled Iddo. Saying, verse 2, the Lord, or Yahweh, have been sore displeased with your fathers. Therefore say thou unto them, thus saith Yahweh of hosts, turn ye unto me, saith Yahweh of hosts, and I will turn unto you, saith Yahweh of hosts. Be ye not as your fathers, unto whom the former prophets have cried, saying, thus saith Yahweh, power of hosts. Turn ye now from your evil ways, and from your evil doings. But they did not hear, nor hearken unto me, saith the Lord. Your fathers, where are they? And the prophets, do they live forever? But my words and my statutes, which I command my servants, the prophets, did they not take hold of your fathers? And they returned and said, like as the Lord of hosts, or Yahweh of hosts, thought to do unto us according to our ways and according to our doings, so hath he dealt with us. So these prophets we see have a similar message for the people. It's a time of reflection, to consider our ways, to turn from our evil ways, like we see here, all as a reminder, because look at how we got here under the Medo-Persians, and then before that, the Babylonians for a 70-year time frame. It's all because of our disobedience as a people. Now that we've been blessed and given the opportunity to go back in the land, let's not mess this up now, right? Let's do right by God this time. And this all comes from Ezra 5, 1 and 2. I'll be going back and forth a lot to Ezra 5 and 6 as needed as we go through First Ezra 6 and 7, as they tell the same story pretty much. So let me get this in Ezra 5 and in verse 1 and 2 to go along with what we just read in 6 and 1 of First Esdras. So Ezra 5, 1 and 2, and then we'll continue on. Ezra 5 and 1. It's easy to pass by, right? Because you get the Chronicles, you got Ezra, Nehemiah, then Esther, and you get right to Job. So it's easy to flip past. So Ezra 5 and 1 reads, then the prophets Haggai the prophet and Zechariah the son of Iddo prophesied unto the Jews that were in Judah and Jerusalem in the name of the God of Israel, even unto them. And then it says in verse 2, then rose up Zerubbabel the son of Shealtiel and Jeshua the son of Jozadak, and began to build the house of God, which is at Jerusalem, and with them were the prophets of God helping them, right? So they were prophesying, but they were helping, but they came to the work as well, right? All hands on deck. So let me change that to 6 and 1 to 6 and 1 and 2. Let's go back to First Ezra 6. Let's continue. So I just want to get that harmony between First Ezra 6 and the prophets Haggai and Zechariah, as well as Ezra. I'm going to be going back and forth between Ezra and Esdras the most today. So First Ezra 6, let's read verse 2. It says, then stood up Zerubbabel the son of Salatiel and Jesus the son of Jozadak. See, the spellings are different. Zerubbabel and Jesus, whereas before we read Zerubbabel and Jeshua, as well as Joshua, all referring to the same figures. The son of Jozadak. I remember Zerubbabel represents the house of David, and Jeshua represents the house of Aaron. It says, and began to build the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, the prophets of the Lord being with them and helping them. It's kind of funny, in different times in history, from the time of David going forward, you'll see anytime there's a major reform, you always have key figures from those two particular houses, right? Oftentimes representing the Most High in a big way. And, it's no different when we go into the time of even the New Testament, right? We've got John the Baptist representing the house of Aaron, who's a forerunner to Jesus the Christ, representative of the house of David in that time as well. So reading on in verse 3, it says, at the same time came unto them Sisinnes, the governor of Syria, and Phoenice with Sathru-Buzans and his companions, and said unto them, right? So you can link 6 and 3 with Ezra 5 and 3. We'll see instead of Sisinnes, it'll say Tatnai, just a surname, but referring to the same figure. And then where it says Sathru-Buzans, we'll see Shether Baznai. Let me just get it so we can see it. So when I go to Ezra 5 and 3, it reads, at the same time came to them Tatnai, governor on this side the river, and Shether Boznai, and their companions, and said thus unto them, who have commanded you to build this house and to make up this wall? Right? So questioning them and saying, on whose authority are you rebuilding? Right? The house, this house, this temple. But just want to show those two, and just how the names look a little different, but we know we're talking about the same people. So back in First Esdras 6, now we're in verse 7. Verse 4. So First Esdras 6 and 4. By whose appointment do you build this house and this roof and perform all the other things? And who are the workmen that perform these things? Right? So they're trying to interfere with the work, right? Question them and saying, who allowed you to do this? Because as far as they're concerned, Darius and the Medes, they're the ones that have the chief authority on the earth. They're the ones that say yes and no. You may not, right? Because they're the dominant empire. So you see with the Western countries now, with America at the helm, right? Esau, right, being the beast as well as the whore that rides the beast. They do the same thing when they go to other countries. They say, who allowed you to do this or say this, right? Because they have the chief authority now. So it's similar. Just like at this time, they had that chief authority during this time. It says, verse 5, nevertheless, the elders of the Jews obtained favor because the Lord or Yahweh had visited the captivity, right? Allowing exiles to come out of the Medo-Persian captivity after doing a 70-year stint with the Babylonians and being allowed to go back into the land. That's why it says visited the captivity. 6 says, and they were not hindered from building until such time as signification was given unto Darius concerning them, and an answer received. Right? So they're allowed to build by the Most High ultimately, but now what we're going to see is as these guys go and try to tell on us, they're going to go into the records of a previous ruler in the Persian Empire, Cyrus in particular, and see what was written there in the records to see whether or not, even according to them, which was really according to the Most High ultimately when you read the prophecy, since the Most High was had power over Cyrus and was made him his servant, and even Cyrus acknowledging the God of the Israelites when it came to his enterprise pertaining to us. We'll see evidence of that as we read on. It says, verse 7, the copy of the letters which Sisines, or Tatnai, governor of Syria and Phoenice, and Satharbuzans, or Shether Baznai, with their companions, rulers in Syria and Phoenice, wrote and sent unto Darius, to the king Darius, greeting. Verse 8, let all things be known unto our Lord the King, that being come unto the country of Judea and entering into the city of Jerusalem, we found in the city of Jerusalem the ancients of the Jews that were of the captivity, building an house unto the Lord, great and new, of hewn and costly stones, and a timber already laid up on the walls. And those works are done with great speed, and the work goeth on prosperously in their hands, and with all glory and diligence it is made. Right? So, see, they're commenting on our swiftness and our efficiency when it comes to the progress of getting this done. Right? Which, it's the Most High that's made the nations that way, but it's like a vexation, a grievous vexation unto the other nations anytime we're doing well, whether it be one of us, a group of us, let alone an entire nation of us, right? Doing well and prospering, right? Especially when it comes to doing it in the name of our God. Because like we read in the blessing and the curse, you go to Deuteronomy 28 as well as Leviticus 26. There's not this thing of equality like they like to push out there, especially Esau. Even when Esau, he'll say that, He'll present that way, but what he actually demonstrates is dominance, right? And not by justice, right? He'll present justice, but actually exercise dominance. But he'll say, equality in the West, whether it be America or the British or Britain or France or Spain. You look at their empires, they'll use those words, but they won't show it. They won't do it. But we shouldn't be shocked by that, knowing the truth as Israelites, because the Most High already told us it's either going to be one way or the other. It's either going to be Israel on top, ruling over the nations with righteous justice, or it's going to be the other nations being given a chance to rule over us and doing it however they will, oftentimes not according to God's justice. With exceptions here and there, like we're going to see here with King Cyrus, and just this particular instance of allowing us to go back and rebuild the temple, which ultimately is the Most High allowing us to go back to rebuild the temple. He's using Cyrus as his tool, or as his servant, his object, his beast of burden, to allow us to do this righteous thing for him. So now I'm in verse 11, 1 Esdras 6:11. Then asked we these elders, saying, this is the letter still, and they're telling us to Darius. Then we asked these elders, referring to the elders of our people who were doing the work to rebuild the temple, by whose commandment build you this house and lay the foundation of these works? Therefore, to the intent that we might give knowledge unto thee by writing, and demand of them who were the chief doers, and we required of them the names and writing of their principal men. See, they came to the construction site, right? On the temple, where we're rebuilding the temple, laying the foundation, everything else. And they do like how the heathen do now, and they see us doing something else. They'll come on the scene, right? Uninvited a lot of times, and say, who's in charge here? Who authorized you guys to do this? Right? They want to find out who's in charge so they can hold them accountable, because if they can get the leaders in charge in trouble, that'll get the other folks that follow leaders to be afraid, right? Especially if they get punished. Then it says in 13, so they gave us this answer: we are the servants of the Lord, which made heaven and earth. So now here's their response to them when they question them what they're doing. 14, and as for this house, it was built many years ago by a king of Israel, great and strong, and was finished. Right? So giving these guys a brief history lesson, right? In case they didn't know. Right? It's interesting they didn't mention who the king was by name, but we know who they're referring to. Right? So link with 6 and 14. Ezra 5 and verse 11. Once again, Ezra chapter 5 and verse 11 to link with 6 and 14. So Ezra 5 and 11, it reads, and thus they returned us answers saying, so the same letter by these same heathens to Darius about questioning us and us rebuilding the temple, saying, we are the servants of the God of heaven and earth, and build the house that was built these many years ago, which a great king of Israel builded and set up. So now let's get the reference for this. Let's go to 1 Kings chapter 6. 1 Kings chapter 6 and verse 1. So this is 1 Kings chapter 6 and verse 1, which reads, and it came to pass in the 480 year after the children of Israel were come out of the land of Egypt. I like that reference there, because if you guys remember, I'd put together this spreadsheet and shared it with you guys on the group chat concerning doing a timeline from Adam all the way down to the time of Solomon, what you can do to pretty much determine, if you know that the temple was built by a certain time or a certain year, you can pretty much figure out what year Adam was born, right? Because it tracks the years as far as when so and so begat so and so, and so and so begat so and so. And there's different scriptures if you just know where to look in between those genealogies and those major events with those timelines, where you can figure out pretty much how much time has gone by, pretty much from the time of Adam all the way to the time of Solomon when we built our first temple. And there's a key verse towards the end of that list that I used it to show that. But for most folks to read the Bible, just see the oh, so and so begat so and so, and they were this many years old when he begat them, and okay, and it's just kind of very monotonous. But these dates and times and years are important, right? And it's keeping track of when a person is born and how long they've been. These things are important, right? So we can have a kind of perspective of the day and time that we're in. The scriptures give us this, right? So now it was that much time since we came out of the land of Egypt. So by the time we came out of the land of Egypt, the period of the judges, and this going into the time of the kings, right? This 480-year period. But then it says, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month Ziph, which is the second month, which is the month that we're in right now. Now, we would call it the second month ourselves, but we oftentimes would adopt the names that the other nations call months, just like we see now with our calendars, right? We're going by the Greco-Roman, more particular the Roman titles for these months. But the nations then gave that name Ziph to this month, right? It says, which is the second month that he began to build the house of the Lord, right? So as you read through this chapter, it goes into some finer details, which are a fun exercise to do, which once we get here in the Sabbath services, we're still in Samuel's. It might be an interesting exercise we might do where whoever's going through the service, maybe we take a look and maybe do a cross compare between the temple, the dimensions, the things used, right? The objects used, the shape of it, and compare it to the tabernacle, the congregation. Since the temple was more or less like a tabernacle, was like the tabernacle, but just scaled up when it comes to the shape, the size, dimensions, etc. But now stay in 1 Kings 6, and we'll get the last two verses, 37 as well as 38. But we'll revisit this later in the future Sabbath service when we get here. So we get the key things here. It says in 1 Kings 6 and 37, in the 4th year was the foundation of the house of Yahweh laid in the month Ziph, right? Then it says in 38, and in the 11th year, in the month Bul, which is the 8th month, so that was the name we gave that 8th month, Bul, was the house finished throughout all the parts thereof, and according to all the fashioning of it, right? So now we got the 4th year all the way to the 11th year. Well, how much time is that? It says here, so was he 7 years in building it, right? So that's how long it took them to build that particular temple at that time, right? So it was a serious construction project, and wasn't something that we wanted to rush, but we see the righteous timing in that 7 year period, in that they finished it, right? So we could also link Second Chronicles chapter 3, and we'll get verses 1 and 2 that deal with this history as well. Second Chronicles chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. So this is Second Chronicles 3 and 1. It says, then Solomon began to build the house of the Lord Yahweh at Jerusalem in Mount Moriah, where the Lord Yahweh appeared unto David his father, in the place that David had prepared in the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite, right? Which you go into the history, we just read about that not too long ago, back in 2 Samuel's, right? Well, actually, I think we haven't gotten there yet, but we will in the future, that particular event, if we haven't read it already. I think we did, right? We're bringing the Ark of the Testimony back into Jerusalem. And because a brother Uzzah took it upon himself to touch the ark, because in his mind he thought it was going to fall because the ox stumbled, and he killed the ghost. It says David was fearful of the Lord that day. He said, you know what, let me just set it aside, and then, that the Lord's wrath be stayed, and, kind of regroup and think this through, make sure we cross our T's and dot our I's if we continue this process of bringing the ark back to Jerusalem from up north. This is in verse 2, and he began to build in the second day of the second month, in the fourth year of his reign, right? So here goes even the day as well as the month, right? Second month and the second day of the month is when he started. So around the same time of year that we're in, right? Well, we're kind of at the end of the month, but it was the beginning of the second month. So like the spring season when they started to do this project, which is, makes sense, right? Once you have the weather be in your favor, right? When you're doing construction. So now back in Esdras 6, let's read on in verse 15. It says, but when our fathers provoked God unto wrath and sinned against the Lord of Israel, which is in heaven, he gave them over into the power of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, of the Chaldees. This Nebuchadnezzar is another spelling. When you read it in Ezra, it says Nebuchadnezzar, but it's referring to the same figure. But then it says in verse 16, who pulled down, referring to Nebuchadnezzar, who pulled down the house and burnt it and carried away the people captive into Babylon. So now let's get this in Ezra 5 from Esdras 6, 15 and 16. This links with Ezra chapter 5 and verse 12. So Ezra chapter 5 and verse 12, which reads, but after that our fathers had provoked the God of heaven unto wrath, he gave them into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, the Chaldean, who destroyed this house and carried the people away into Babylon. Right? And the historical reference we can make to this, because not only was it a history at this point, there was also a prophecy by Jeremiah and a warning from God to say, look, to the kings of Judah at the time, turn from your evil, and this won't happen. But if you continue your evil, I will allow these Babylonians, who are like the top empire on the earth, to come in and overthrow your city and your country. I'll let it happen. Unless you listen to my prophet Jeremiah, what he's warning you about because of your wickedness. So, okay, good.
It's kind of like what you're seeing right now with Israel, where legislation is being passed here in the U.S. to give Israel this amount of money out of the budget. So in the budget, they fix it where Israel gets some sum of money, right, to continue in their project. So that's what was going on back then, right, with the Persians, right, starting with Cyrus. With Cyrus, then Darius came along, continuing the same legislation, but they had to do a search to make sure that the legislation was actually put in place. It wasn't, those guys, our brothers that went there and started doing their own work. Right. So it was in the legislation. It's kind of like the same thing going on right now in modern time. It's the same thing that was going on, but the Most High instituted the whole thing where it would be going down the way it went down. So it wasn't legislation, how we might consider it today.
Right. Come. You remember this one common theme, right, about the Most High ruling in the kingdom of men. He giveth it to whomsoever he will. He set up kings, he removeth kings. Right? Most High is in charge. So don't be, taken back by this perceived democracy, one man, one vote, right, that they try to sell us, when really ultimately it's the Most High that allows. And even on their according to their own rules, which they don't, like I said, they present one way, but they do something else. They have an electoral college that actually decides the presidency, even everybody doing the popular vote. And then even behind that, you do a little bit more digging, you realize, man, we might as well be like the kings and queens over there in England and Monaco and France and Spain. Well, not France anymore, but Spain, place where they have royalty, because these damn presidents are related to these guys, right? Oftentimes are not even distant cousins. You go into the majority of presidents, so it's just like, what the hell? They told us land of the free and the home of the brave, but is America just another colony? What's going on here? But the prophecy already told us that revelation, right? Which we just, what you went into about, the eighth coming out of the seventh and goes into perdition, right? The seventh referring to Britain, and talking about the eighth, which is Babylon, right? The whore that rides on top of the beast, which is the countries in Europe, the main countries in Europe that are Esau too. So the prophecy was never wrong, right? And that's where we can kind of lean on, where we won't get deceived like our people in the other nations by what Esau tells us versus what they actually do, right? But this is 2 Kings 24 in verse 2. 2 Kings 24, let me start from 1, and then I'll read verse 2. It says, in his days, and you read above, is referring to our king named Joachim, right? Of the line of the line of David, right? As far as the line of kings in the southern kingdom. In his days, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up, and Joachim became his servant 3 years. Then he turned and rebelled against him, right? Because of the wickedness of the kings that came after Josiah, who was a righteous king, right? They wanted to do things not according to God. And then when the Most High punished them by putting the Babylonians over them, they wanted to rebel and do things their way. So the Most High said, oh, no, you don't. That's why it says, and the Lord, in verse 2, and the Lord sent against him bands of the Chaldees, and bands of the Syrians, and bands of the Moabites, and bands of the children of Ammon, and sent them against Judah to destroy it according to the word of Yahweh, which he spake by his servants, the prophets. You see that? So Most High is not going to be mocked, right? And Most High is not a man he should lie, neither the son of man that he should repent, right? To where the Babylonians are the main culprits. Look at this. The Most High even put the spear on the nations that were surrounding and let them get a hand in as well to take out Judah. And had we put the Most High first, we'll be looking at this situation? Probably not. But, we go through the book of Jeremiah in particular, we see that. But it's so interesting because the Most High knew even before Jeremiah prophesied. This even goes back to what Isaiah prophesied. But I'll get those verses in a sec. Stay in 2 Kings, but get chapter 20. Let's go back a couple pages to chapter 20. Let's get verse 17. So 2 Kings chapter 20 and verse 17. Chapter 20, verse 17 reads, behold, the days come. So I'll read 16. It says, and Isaiah said unto Hezekiah, hear the word of Yahweh. This is at the King Hezekiah, who was some centuries before what we're reading about as far as the Babylonians coming in to destroy. It says he had the Babylonian leaders come as like a guest, right? And he showed them, the treasury, and he showed them the temple, and, just different things as far as Jerusalem's concerned, right? Because remember, at this time, it was the Assyrians. They were the top guys at this point. And we already had a victory against them, right? Which was an awesome story that you read about in the previous chapters of 2 Kings. So we kind of had these guys as like coming as like a guest, like like we see today. Like you were talking about compared to things like today. I'll do that again with this. It's like we'll see in the news when presidents visit each other, right? And they'll kind of show them sitting down whatever stateroom, right? If they go over to Russia, they'll go to the Kremlin. If they go to this country, to go to whatever their Capitol building is, and they'll sit down like a nice little fancy room, and they'll be sitting in these nice chairs, and they'll be smiling, waving at the cameras, and they'll smile at each other and shake hands, and the news will be like, we had the visitor of the president of this country coming. They're going to discuss trade agreements and, try to renew the friendship they had during the time of, this war or whatever's going on. But, it's oftentimes like a photo op. sit down and smile, and, break bread. So that's kind of what was happening here with Hezekiah and these this ambassades that came from Babylon, right? So he was showing them just different things that they had. So Isaiah tells them this in verse 17. Behold, the days come that all that is in thine house, and that which thy fathers have laid up in store unto this day, shall be carried unto Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith the Lord. Then it says in 18, and of thy sons they shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Then it says in 19, then said Hezekiah and to Isaiah, good is the word of Yahweh which thou hast spoken. And he said, is it not good if peace and truth be in my days? Right? So that's a harsh prophecy, right? To hear that. But Isaiah told him the truth as the Most High told him, right? And we see Hezekiah acknowledging it, right? But then he says, I guess he looks at the situation and says, well, better for worse, at least I'll have, righteousness and truth during my days, right? We had this victory over the Assyrians, and we'll, I'm going to keep conducting business according to righteousness. But clearly, you see that those sons that come after me to rule aren't going to follow my example. At least not until King Josiah would come around. So, what can you do, right? But yeah, that was I read from chapter 20. I read from 16 down to 19. But now this is also in the book of Isaiah, because what you'll notice is when you read about the different prophets, they oftentimes were contemporary with certain kings. So Isaiah was a prophet during a couple different kings, but Hezekiah was one of them. Let's get it in Isaiah 39 as well. This record. Too far. Isaiah 39, and I'll just read verse 6. But the whole chapter is good to read. It gets the whole story. I'll start from 5 and read down to 8, just so that we capture the same thing that we read in 2 Kings 20. So Isaiah 39, 5 down to 8. Then said Isaiah to Hezekiah, hear the word of Yahweh of hosts. Behold, the days come that all that is in thine house, and that which thy fathers have laid up in store until this day, shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, saith Yahweh. And of thy sons that shall issue from thee, which thou shalt beget, shall they take away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Then said Hezekiah to Isaiah, good is the word of Yahweh which thou hast spoken. He said, moreover, for there shall be peace and truth in my days. Right. I remember one time at camp, someone brought this up, and they tried to say that the Bible plagiarizes. And I was like, okay, give us an example. And they actually had an example, only one. And then I think the other one was just a misunderstanding. But they used this and compared it to 2 Kings 20. And I was just like, I forget who was there at camp at that time. We were just like, dude, they were contemporaries with each other. They just recorded the same event. They were both there, right? That's all that means. They try to use that to say that's why we can't trust the Bible. It's like, come on, man, you can do better than that. Surely you can do better than that to refute the Bible. But now let's also get this. This is the actual event taking place of the Babylonians coming in. As sad as that was. 2 Kings 25. The whole chapter is good. I'm just going to read a couple verses, though, for time's sake, out of the chapter. Because this covers pretty much when the infamous deed was done as far as the foul destruction, because, it didn't just happen in one sitting and with one king. There was a process of, the Babylonians taking over this, taking over that, taking this king, taking that king, and then eventually coming in and just destroying the place. So we were given more than one chance to get it right. and the Most High keeping the Babylonians at bay. But we just couldn't get our act together. After Josiah, those kings that came after him they just dropped the ball heavy. So this is 2 Kings 25. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna read from 8, and I'll go down to 17. 2 Kings 25, 8 down to 17. It reads, in the 5th month, on the 7th day of the month, which is the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. So notice these different events. We notice a pattern of what? These are annals, these are records, right? These are primary sources, right? So don't take the Bible lightly. It's not just fairy tales and inspiration, right? It is inspiration. Yes, there are allegories that teach lessons, but it's also a book of record, a book of history that we can actually corroborate with other primary sources that in the world they'll take more seriously, like the Cyrus Cylinder, or like the Nebuchadnezzar Chronicle, or like the Persian Chronicles, right? See, they have primary sources too. They record events, and events they record actually corroborate and even reference figures in our Kings and Chronicles in our Bible, right? And they'll even have paintings, wall depictions of interactions that we had with them. If you don't want to believe the Bible, but we know the truth in the end. We'll use those things to show people. If you don't want to trust the Bible and trust these primary sources, if you're into archaeology, but we know oftentimes, sometimes it might win some souls over, but oftentimes when a person has a heart of unbelief, they're always going to have an excuse to not believe the Bible and doubt it. But reading on, it says, verse 9, and he burnt the house. I think I skipped something. Came Nebuzaradan, captain of the guard, a servant of the king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem. So this Nebuzaradan, he's like one of Nebuchadnezzar's top guys, right? Like one of his captains, right? It says, and he burnt the house of the Lord, or Yahweh, and the king's house, and all the houses of Jerusalem, and every great man's house burnt he with fire. So he just took out the temple and just took out the whole city. And all the army of the Chaldees that were with the captain of the guard brake down the walls of Jerusalem round about. And the rest of the people that were left in the city, and the fugitives that fell away to the king of Babylon, with the remnant of the multitude, did Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, carry away. But the captain of the guard left of the poor of the land to be vine dressers and husbandmen. So they took our best and brightest, right? Our strongest, right? Our most capable, our most talented, right? To bring them into their government. We see in the book of Daniel, the first couple of verses in chapter 1, it talks about that process as well, right? Which, for an empire, it's cunning, right? Because, the idea is, when you do war with a nation, the best policy is just to annex them, right? Where you take them over and take over their people, their resources, and just merge them into your empire. That way, you don't have any, revenge or ill feelings, at least not as bad as, actually killing their people, especially in battle. And you got, people who want revenge. It's a much better campaign, right? It's a lot less bloodshed, right? And a lot less expense on your part, right? If the country's willing to go along under you and with you, right? So they're trying to salvage as much as they can, even as destroying certain, cities that are in the capital city. This is they left the poor in the land. In verse 12, it says, but the captain of the guard left the poor of the land to be vine dressers and husbandmen, right? So left them behind so they could till the land so that they could partake in the things that we grew still, right? When it came to, like it says here, husbandry and farming. So like those that dealt with orchards and those that dealt with growing grapes, right? Because It'd be extra work to bring your own people in to try to deal with the land, right? Try to figure out and learn from our people who are already there dealing with the land. Better off just keeping them there to do it, and then just, because they don't have any stronger forces to protect them, now they had to do what the Babylonians bidding. So strategic, right? But ultimately, the Most High, being a man of war, allowed this to go down in this fashion. It says in verse 13, and the pillars of brass that were in the house of the Lord, and the bases and the brazen sea that was in the house of Yahweh. Once again, we'll get into these features when we go into Kings. We read First Kings 6, couple verses, but when we get there in the Sabbath service, we'll get into more what these things are. Remember, this is the temple that Solomon built that's being destroyed here. It says, did the Chaldees break in pieces and carry the brass of them into Babylon, to Babylon? 14, and the pots and the shovels and the snuffers and the spoons and all the vessels of brass wherewith they ministered, took they away. So all the different tools that they use to keep the temple clean and functional, they took those. And the fire pans and the bowls, and as such things as were of gold, and gold, silver, and silver the captain of the guard took away. The two pillars, one sea, and the base and the bases which Solomon had made for the house of the Lord. The brass of all these vessels was without weight. So there's two pillars that they were built in the entranceway in the temple, Boaz and Jashin. We'll get into those as well when we get into First Kings. So they took those. Then it says in 17, the height of the one pillar was 18 cubits, and the chapiter upon it was brass, and the height of the chapiter 3 cubits, and the wreathen work and pomegranates upon the chapiter round about, all of brass. And like unto these had the second pillar with wreathen work. Once again, when we get into First Kings, we'll get into those details behind how they had very ornate decorations, these pillars with the chapiters up top, as well as the pomegranate work, which are like, things made to look like pomegranates, right? Because those actual pomegranates, they go bad, obviously, but they're made to look like pomegranates, right? The fruit. I'll stop here in 17, but let's go back to First Esdras 6. But those are just the verses I want to read, just that goes into the evidence of what our people are telling these ambassadors coming from Darius's court, as far as what they're doing and why they're doing it when it comes to rebuilding the temple. So now I'm in 17, 2nd Esdras 6 and 17. I'm gonna get some links for this one too. It says, but in the first year that King Cyrus reigned over the country of Babylon, right? Which we know those details are described very distinctly when we read in Daniel, right? Remember Daniel, he was taken into captivity during the time during one wave when the Babylonians came and take some of us in. But he was still in Babylon when the power switched over from them over to the Persians, right? That was the famous writing on the wall story, right? Which we know is a common phrase folks use now. But how many folks know the history behind where that comes from? Where Daniel prophesied the writing on the wall that it meant the end of the Babylonians being the top force and the Medo-Persians coming in to be the next ones. And Cyrus was that next one. That's what we're referencing here. So in 17 again, but in the first year that King Cyrus reigned over the country of Babylon, Cyrus king wrote to build up this house, right? So they're saying, yeah, Cyrus said and appointed this, right? That what we're doing is legit. Now, to show that, to link with 17, to link with Esdras 6 and 17, write down Ezra 5 and 13. Once again, Ezra 5 and 13. where it reads, "But in the first year of Cyrus, the king of Babylon, the same King Cyrus made a decree to build this house of God." Right? So let's go back to that. Flip back to Ezra chapter 1 and verse 1. So Ezra chapter 1 and verse 1. Oh, did I skip something? No, we're good. So Ezra chapter 1, I'll read down from 1 down to 4. It says, "Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of Yahweh by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation to all his kingdom and put it also in writing, saying," verse 2, "Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord God of heaven hath given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he hath charged me to build him an house at Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is there among you of all his people? His God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and build the house of the Lord God of Israel. He is the God which is in Jerusalem. And whoso remaineth in any place where he sojourneth, let the man of his place help him with silver and with gold and with goods and with beasts, besides the freewill offering for the house of God that is in Jerusalem." So very rare take for a heathen king, right? For him to have dominion, but then to at the same time acknowledge the power that gave him that power, being a God that's not even his, a God with other people. And then what? Giving free reign to for those people to rebuild the temple, right? So this is a rarity amongst the heathen kings, right? To allow for something like this. But here you have it. So that's Ezra chapter 1, verses 1 to 4. And then we can link this. Just flip back one page because it's right at the end of Second Chronicles, chapter 36, which is the last chapter of Second Chronicles. And we're going to read the last two verses, which is verse 22 and 23, which is Chronicles 36, 22. Second Chronicles 36 and 22, it says, "Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, that the word of the Lord, or Yahweh, spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished, the Lord, or Yahweh, stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and put it also in writing, saying," this is the thing that they're looking for, or that they're going to look for as we're in First Esdras 6, that we, the elders, are telling the Darius' people as far as why we're doing this and the authority that we have. 23, "Thus saith Cyrus, king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth have Yahweh power of heaven given me. He hath charged me to build him an house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Who is there among you of all his people? Yahweh, his power be with him, and let him go up." Right? So here's more evidence of that record. And then let's get it also, the record that's being referred to here, which is Jeremiah. So now go to Jeremiah 25. Jeremiah 25. And we're going to read 12 to 14. Jeremiah 25, 12, it says, "It shall come to pass when 70 years are accomplished, that I will punish the king of Babylon and that nation, saith Yahweh, for their iniquity in the land of the Chaldeans, and will make it perpetual desolations." Right? So we had to go into captivity for a 70-year period under the Babylonians. But he's saying that what? After that time, I'm going to allow the Persians to come in and take them out. That's what he's talking about here when he says, "I'm going to punish them," right? Because while I'm judging my people Israel, at the same time, I'm going to judge you for taking them captive. So it just shows you that the Most High never intended for the nations to win. Remember, like it tells us Psalms 105, 14 and 15, right? It says, "You're approved kings for their sakes," referring to us saying, "Touch not mine anointed, cause my prophets no harm." Right? So every time the nations punish us, whether it be Esau in these times or Mizraim before we were in Egypt, or like the Babylonians, like we see here, they're getting a stain on their ledger by doing this, even though it's appointed by God due to our disobedience. Because the Most High always intended for us to rule over them in the end anyway, right? He made them to serve us. So, 13. And I will bring upon that land all my words which I have pronounced against it, even all that is written in this book, which Jeremiah hath prophesied against all the nations. For many nations and great kings shall serve themselves of them also, and I will recompense them according to their deeds and according to the works of their own hands. So Babylon at this time, but nations before and after this time are going to do this, and the Most High is going to pay them back. So that's the full prophecy, right? Let's go chapter 27 as well. Still in Jeremiah, but Jeremiah 27. We'll start from 19. Jeremiah 27, 19, and I'll read to the end, which is verse 22. Jeremiah 27, 19, it says, "For thus saith the Lord of hosts concerning the pillars and concerning the sea, or the brazen sea we read about in the other chapter, and concerning the bases and concerning the residue of the vessels that remain in the city, which Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, took not when he carried away captive Jeconiah, the son of Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, from Jerusalem to Babylon, and all the nobles of Judah and Jerusalem. Yea, thus saith the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, concerning the vessels that remain in the house of the Lord, or Yahweh, in the house of the king of Judah and of Jerusalem. They shall be carried to Babylon, and there shall they be until the day that I visit them, saith Yahweh. Then will I bring them up and restore them to this place." Right? So you can't get the leaders first, the elders, the talented, like as was it W.B. Du Bois, right? In the modern time, he'll make a reference to in his writings. He talks about the talented tenth, right, of the Black Americans, right? So it's going into how within a people, even our people, you have like an upper echelon, right, of leadership. You always had that from those times to these times, right? The best and brightest, right? Yeah, I finished that. Also in Jeremiah, you might not have to flip a page, chapter 29. Let's get 10 through, I'm going to stop at 14. Jeremiah 29 and 10, it says, "For thus saith Yahweh, that after 70 years be accomplished at Babylon, I will visit you and perform my good word toward you and cause you to return to this place." So even though we're going to be taken away, he's going to allow us to come back eventually at this time. "For I know the thoughts that I think toward you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. Then shall ye call upon me, and ye shall go and pray unto me, and I will hearken unto you. And ye shall seek me and find me, when ye shall search for me with all your heart. And I will be found of you, saith Yahweh, and I will turn away your captivity, and I will gather you from all the nations, and from all the places whither I have driven you, saith Yahweh, and I will bring you again into the place whence I caused you to be carried away captive." Right? So a prophecy for them, but even a prophecy for us now, us being in Babylon the Great, right? Which pretty much picks up the pieces where they left off. This empire that we're in now, taking on the spirit of many empires, uh, not just Babylon, but even Sodom and Gomorrah, as well as Egypt, right? Taking on those same spirits. So it's like a big whammy when it comes to this captivity, right? That we're dealing with now. But the Most High is merciful in that He knows that a certain portion of us are gonna, with all our heart, turn back to Him, and for those of us that do, He's gonna bring us back to the Holy Land of Israel in style, right? With the Elohim being our help. Daniel chapter 9. I like this because it shows it is an example of the prophets being, aware of each other, right? As they were contemporaries with each other, just like Zechariah and Haggai prophesied around the same time. You got Jeremiah and Daniel prophesied within this around the same time period as well. I think Daniel was a little bit before Jeremiah, but they kind of overlap each other because Daniel was kind of taken away during that first wave when Nebuchadnezzar came in, but Jeremiah was prophesying more towards the time getting extra close to when Jerusalem was going to be utterly taken down. But this is Daniel chapter 9, verses 1 and 2. But we see Daniel, he lived some time because not only was he there for the Babylonian captivity, he transitioned over into the Medo-Persian captivity and was a high official for them as well, and did some mighty interpretations during their time. It's the equivalent I like to compare it to in a modern day setting. It's kind of like when you have what do you call? It's kind of like a like when a company, right, buys out another company, right? They call it mergers and acquisitions, right? For the big Fortune 500 companies, especially the Fortune 100s, they have like an M&A department or merger and acquisition department where they'll kind of look out different companies and say, okay, which ones can we buy into us and take hold of whatever patents they have, whatever inventions they have, whatever products and services they have to make our own. And they'll kind of go through the company and say, all right, everybody's in this company, who can we afford to lay off? Who do we want to keep on board, right? That's going to help us, absorb them into our company and utilize their products and services in the most efficient fashion to make them our own products and services. So when it came to the Medo-Persia taking over the Babylonians, they took over all the people they took captive as well, including us as Israelites. So you look at the best and brightest Israelites that were there, right, and said, oh, okay, let's have them work for us now, right? Let's not just kill them. Let's use them too. Just like the Babylonians that had them before, we're going to use them to further our enterprise, to make ourselves stronger, right? So this is Daniel chapter 9. I'm just going to read 1 and 2. Daniel chapter 9, verses 1 and 2, it reads, in the first year of Darius, the son of Ahasuerus of the seed of the Medes, which was made king over the realm of the Chaldeans. Verse 2, it says, in the first year of his reign, I, Daniel, understood by books the number of the years whereof the word of Yahweh came to Jeremiah the prophet, that he would accomplish 70 years in the desolations of Jerusalem. So you're showing you that Daniel was aware of Jeremiah, right? They were contemporaries, they knew of each other, right? Now, if they met, I don't know if we have any record of them actually meeting, but clearly if he didn't meet him, he at least met Baruch, or maybe someone that scribed for Jeremiah, right? To know about this prophecy as well. And it's funny because Ezekiel, he was contemporary with them as well. So Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel, they all were prophets around the same time period, right? During this Babylonian rise and then leading into the Medo-Persians. So they were all kind of contemporaries around the same time, but they were in different places, but around the same time prophesying different prophecies pertaining to, what was going to happen at that time, and also things that would happen in the future, even to the things that we're dealing with right now and the things that haven't happened yet. So three great prophets to look up to and to really study and to compare and contrast, right? Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. And we have Isaiah, the other, who was some time before them. He was during the time of Hezekiah and the kings before and after. So yeah, nice example of one prophet shouting out another prophet. In this case, Daniel shouting out Jeremiah. Okay, so back to First Esdras 6. Let's read on in 18. So First Esdras 6 and 18, back in the Apocrypha again. It reads, "And holy vessels of gold and of silver that Nebuchadnezzar had carried away out of the house at Jerusalem, and had set them in his own temple, who Cyrus the king brought forth again out of the temple at Babylon, and they were delivered to Zerubbabel and to Sennacherib the ruler." Right? So now notice the different spelling, but then even also the phrasing when it says, and to Sennacherib the ruler, because you'll see in different Bible dictionaries they argue over, you know, Zerubbabel and Sennacherib, were they different figures, were they the same figure? Which, when you read in Ezra, it actually refers to them as like the same person, which, you know, I guess there's arguments for both, but I kind of lean more towards the direction of them being the same. Just like Daniel having a name given to them by the Babylonians, Belteshazzar, for example, right? I could see Zerubbabel having that name, but then also having a name from the captivity that they probably gave him being a governor, and them kind of dealing with, the elite of our people, the top of our people, and them giving them their own name. Here it's pronounced Sedabasaris, but we're going to read it in Ezra where it says Sheshbazzar. So let's get Ezra 5 again, but this time we're going to get verse 14, which links with the first Ezra 6 and 18. So Ezra 5 and 14 reads, "And the vessels also of gold and silver of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took out of the temple that was at Jerusalem and brought them into the temple of Babylon, those that Cyrus the king take out of the temple of Babylon. And they were delivered unto one whose name was Sheshbazzar, whom he had made governor." Right? I think in the side caption it mentions deputy. Right? So here it mentions Sheshbazzar. That's the same as son of Basaris, or son of Basar. You might have son of Basar in your King James. I got the 1611, so they had that us at the end. But now link this with Ezra as well, but go to chapter 1. I'm going to read from 7 down to 11. Ezra chapter 1, verse 7. I'm going to read to 11, which reads, Ezra chapter 1, verse 7. "Also Cyrus the king brought forth the vessels of the house of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had brought forth out of Jerusalem, and had put them in the house of his gods," right? That's what we were reading about earlier. "Even those that Cyrus, king of Persia, bring forth by the hand of Mithridath, the treasurer," so that's one of his officials, right? That's like we call the Department of Treasury, right? Like we have here in the U.S. Persia's supposed to be the one who keeps account of the buying and selling when it comes to the government as a whole, and numbered them unto Sheshbazzar the prince of Judah. And this is the number of them: 30 chargers of gold, 1,000 chargers of silver, 9 and 29. So this is like they call it a balance sheet, right? A financial statement, if you will, right? That we still do today, right? They did it back then too, right? They kept account. 10, 30 basins of gold, silver basins of a second sort, 410. All other vessels 1,000. All the vessels of gold and of silver were 5,400. All these did Sheshbazzar bring up with them of the captivity that were brought up from Babylon unto Jerusalem. Also, we can get Ezra 6 and 5, chapter 6 and verse 5, where it mentions the same thing. Once again, Ezra, same book, chapter 6 and verse 5, where it says, "And also let the golden and silver vessels of the house of God, which Nebuchadnezzar took forth out of the temple which is in Jerusalem, and brought into Babylon, be restored, and brought again into the temple which is at Jerusalem, every one to his place, and place them in the house of God." So, more evidence, more emphasis on what? Records showing that they're not in the wrong. They're doing what they're supposed to do. They're doing what they should be allowed to do in rebuilding. Let's go back to 2 Kings 24 again. 2 Kings 24. And let's start from verse 10, though, this time. 2 Kings 24 and verse 10. Which reads, "At that time the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against Jerusalem, and the city was besieged. And Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came up against the city, and his servants did besiege it. And Joachim, the king of Judah, went out to the king of Babylon, he and his mother, and his servants, and his princes, and his officers. And the king of Babylon took him in the 8th year of his reign. And he carried out thence all the treasures of the house of Yahweh, and the treasure of the king's house, and cut in pieces all the vessels of gold which Solomon, the king of Israel, had made in the temple of Yahweh, as Yahweh had said. And he carried away all Jerusalem, and all the princes, and all the mighty men of valor, even 10,000 captives, and all the craftsmen and smiths. None remained save the poorest sort of the people in the land." You see that? Then it says in 15, "And he carried away Joachim to Babylon, and the king's mother, and the king's wives, and his officers, and the mighty of the land. Those he carried he into captivity from Jerusalem to Babylon, and all the men of might, even 7,000, and craftsmen and smiths 1,000, all that were strong and apt for war. Even them the king of Babylon brought captive to Babylon." So once again, taking the best and brightest away, so that those that remain to farm, to do husbandry, and to work the vineyard, keep them around so that they can keep the productivity going for being producers, right? Producing, different plants, different animals, right, to be used, and digging up their minerals, right, which we know are like the essential resources, right, that we use to enrich ourselves. So warfare at its finest, right?
Wow. While a lot of information is coming out, I know it can be overwhelming and might be a bit much for Israel to keep up. I just want to say this: what's pretty much is going on here in in First Esdras, and now we got verse 16, is the notable men that were in Jerusalem in those areas where they stationed. So now they come and question the men that Darius appointed to go back and rebuild the temple. So in the midst of it, those guys being in charge, they won't report because they saw some people came from exile and start doing some work in the land. So they want to know what's happening, who give them authorization to start building in the land, because they're also responsible men in that area. So they want report, right? So that they can send report to the king Darius, so that they can make sure that those guys, they're not doing anything illegal. And that's what Kahan is going into, showing the different proof of what they say that they're doing, and going back and forth and linking up those scriptures is just to show that, what they're doing, it was already spoken of in the scriptures, it was already prophesied, that's what's happening, right? Just in case, if you, kind of like, get sidetracked of what is being brought out.
Come. And hopefully you guys are writing these links down, because I structured these in a way to where as you go through each verse, you can connect the dots. So that's why I'll repeat verses. That's why I'll connect them with where we're at in Esdras, with what Ezra and along with the things that Ezra is actually talking about. I got one more to go with verse 18, along with 2 Kings 24:10-16. But this is Second Chronicles chapter 36, 5-8, to go along with that. Which in Second Chronicles 36, I'll start from 5. It says, Joachim was 25 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 11 years in Jerusalem, and he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord his God. Against him came up Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and bound him with fetters to carry him to Babylon. Nebuchadnezzar also carried the vessels of his house of the Lord to Babylon and put them in his temple at Babylon. Now the rest of the acts of Joachim and his abominations which he did, in that which was found of him, behold, they are written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah. And Joachim his son reigned in his stead. As you go down, it goes into more, but like I said, these are just the different things that led up to us going into captivity. After Josiah died, you had about 3 kings that didn't do right by God, and as you've been reading the scriptures, as a first strike, the Most High said, "I'm gonna take your leaders." You know, second, third strike, I'm gonna take out your city, take out your temple, and take out the city and the surrounding areas. So that's what this evidence is. That's what all this evidence is of as we go through these Kings and Chronicles. That's why they call them the books of Kings and the books of Chronicles, right? Because they have that historical record. So that was the last link for verse 18. Let's go back to first Esdras. Make sure I say it right. Mix it up with Ezra. And like I said, if folks need anything repeated, just let me know in the chat. But you know, if you just go back and rewind it, it's pretty sequential.
Let me chime in real quick also.
Uh-huh.
It's like when you look at the book of Chronicles, right? The book of Chronicles are pretty much stories that you find in 1st, 2nd Samuel, 1st King and 2nd King, right? They arrange it in a way where it pretty much tells us what happened, why we brought, calamity unto us, like you just mentioned, right? Why calamity came unto us in the 1st Chronicle, right? And the way it arranges is how the Most High did not let his plan for us, right, derail from our disobedience. Even though we were disobedient, but still the Most High plans continue. So that's pretty much what you're gonna read in 1st and 2nd Chronicle.
Mm-hmm. All right. So this is first Esdras 6. Now we're in 19. Which in first Esdras 6:19 it says, with commandment that he should carry away the same vessels and put them in the temple at Jerusalem, and that the temple of the Lord should be built in his place. Then it says in verse 20, then the same son of Osiris, same as Sheshbazzar from Ezra, being come thither, laid the foundation of the house of the Lord at Jerusalem, and from that time to this, being still a building, it is not yet fully ended. Now therefore, if it seem good unto the king, let search be made among the records of King Cyrus, and if it be found that the building of the house of the Lord at Jerusalem have been done with the consent of King Cyrus, and if our Lord the king be so minded, let him signify unto us thereof. Right? So they said what they told the kings. They told King Darius what they did, and they said what the elders responded with, going into the history and how they're approved of it and the record as far as them being destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar, but then them being allowed to rebuild by Cyrus. And now they're saying, King, that's what they said, but let's look for the evidence to see if it's true, because we don't know if what they're saying is true. We want to find written documentation. But we got the documentation in our Bible, which we just went through, to show these events, right? But now they're going to search for it, and let's see what they come up with. It says 23. then commanded King Darius to seek among the records at Babylon. And so at Ecbatana, the palace which is in the country of Media, Ecbatana, you'll see it spelled Ecbatane as well. That's like one of their chief cities when you go into different regions in amongst the Medes or Media. It says what is in the country of Media. This Media just being like where the Medes are, right? Because remember, it's a joint empire, the Medo-Persian Empire, right? There was like a dual rulership. It says there was found a roll wherein these things were recorded.
Right. It's kind of like that's where they kept records of the. That's where they kept all the records. Like it's an archive.
Mm-hmm.
Like we have the Library of Congress.
Right.
That's pretty much similar to that.
Right. Well, when they talk about in history, when the Greeks took over from the Persians and Medes, they set up the library in Alexandria, right? Which they try to say that was the first information technology was the Library of Alexandria, which we know is a joke because the Greeks didn't invent record keeping, right?
Like the Romans, kept records.
They kept
Still all their
records too
Yeah,
after them,
yeah,
right?
they still all their records and keep records.
Right, but the Greeks pretty much copied things from the Hamites and what they did. So it's just like, but with Esau, he tries to sell it as though, you know, the modern civilization began with the Greeks, as if the Persians, the Medes, the Babylonians before them, the Assyrians before them, the Egyptians before them were just like, what's going on? What do we do? They didn't have any knowledge of science or records. It's ridiculous. But when you're in power, you have that power, you have that ability to, retell history and tell it in a way to where, you're the enlightened one and the rest are just in the dark.
Right. It's like the Greek way of seeing things or colonizing is more like seeking the goods.
Uh-huh.
Right? Seeking goods when they conquer somebody and seeking their goods and they make it their own, and then they intertwine it with their own, ideology, their way of life, their way they think on things, and then they claim it, right? But it's pretty much colonizing, keeping some culture they think is good, and then intertwining with theirs, and then they keep going. So that was pretty much their idea, and that's why when we had the solutions, he was very keen to continue what he believed Alexander would have done if he was alive.
Right. We were talking about that, I think, Day of Simon, right? You were saying how with the Ptolemies, they more like liberal, if you will. They kind of they let the Egyptians, they let other cultures do what they will, and let the cultures grow on their own and interact with each other. Whereas more so with the Seleucids, with like the Antiochs, they would be more like do it our way or the highway.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So you can link First Ezra 6:23, going all the way down to about 34. It parallels what you read in Ezra chapter 6, verses 1 to 12. I'll say it again. From Ezra chapter 6, verses 23 to 34, link that with Ezra in the 66 books, chapter 6, verses 1 to 12. We won't go back and forth as much. I just want to do it with this the previous part as the elders were bringing out important historical events. But this is more of a straight through read. I'm going to read it in First Esdras as far as the response, as far as the letter. But like I said, it parallels that in Ezra 6, 1 to 12. So now picking up in Ezra's, First Esdras 6, now I'm in verse 24, reads, in the first year of the reign of Cyrus, King Cyrus, this is pretty much the evidence, right? That yes, we had the seal of approval to rebuild the temple. Ultimately, we know it's from the Most High, but we know we're dealing with heathens, so we need, we need some sort of government document, like a notary, to say yes, you can build here, a permit, right, to do construction, to conduct business here. So this is the receipt, if you will.
But while these things are very important because it is high history,
Mm-hmm.
and it is very important to even pay attention and go back and read it because when it thing with the thing with history, our people tends to like smooth things.
Mm-hmm.
You know, prophesy to a smooth thing. Let's keep it, uh, like to the surface. But really, we need to know about these things
Mm-hmm.
and then intertwine with them because this is our history. But when you read these things, it kind of like want to put you to sleep. So that's why we don't know our history.
Come.
You kind of like want to fight yourself to just stay in it.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Yeah. I can kind of see that a little bit.
Yeah.
That's why I say when we get the Chronicles, it's gonna be interesting. Cause yeah, so and so begat so and so. They begat so and so. He was this many years old when he begat this person. It was this age. It was this old. He was this old when he begat this person. It's just like it's like unless you can actually show us like something that's like going on now, and say, look, this is why Ishmael does this. Because look, when you go back in their records, this is what they did back then, and it's like, oh, okay, and you can make a connection. Now it's like what makes it interesting. But it's even looking at like us in the past, like when we think about our high school days and middle school days and even grade school days in some cases, you know, those tend to be like one of the two subjects we tend to had the worst time with because we probably didn't have the best teachers.
Right.
We were either math teachers and history. For different reasons, obviously, but those are probably the toughest classes to get through. If you didn't have a love for it, or if the teacher that you had didn't really have a love for it, or wait till like kind of make it alive or make it interactive, it was just like, oh god, math. Ugh. Even if the teacher knew what they were doing, if they weren't having an ability or a way to make it memorable or make it easy to understand, you have a tough time in that class. And you say to yourself, God, is something wrong with me? God, why can't I get this stuff right? Why can't I do well when the math test comes, when the history test comes? Jeez.
Right. And that's part of the reason why we can't figure out why the Yahushua came for Israel. Because all it's mentioned when you read the book is Judah, right? Keeps mentioning Judah, but barely, because after the Assyrian captivity, right? The Jeroboam and Jeroboam just went.
Mm-hmm.
And since then, Israel just went. All we hear now is Judah, right? So that's why all Israel don't know who they are, and we don't even know that the northern tribes, they are our people, right? But we got to go back to the history to really know what happened. If we don't know the history, we not gonna know the rest of the book.
Come. That's why 12 tribes prophecy is so powerful. Mm-hmm. To rebuild a nation, right? To bring the two stick together, to make them one again.
Come.
That's the goal. So, where did I leave off?
Verse 20 in Second Esdras.
First Esdras, you mean, right?
First Esdras, come.
I think I'm in 24, right?
Yeah, 24. Its height should be.
Yeah, 24. Because I read about the roll. They found the roll. So we're about to read the receipt that Cyrus said, sure, they're good to go. In the first year of the reign of Cyrus, King Cyrus commanded that the house of the Lord at Jerusalem should be built again where they do sacrifice with continual fire. 25, whose height shall be 60 cubits, and the breadth 60 cubits, with 3 rows of hewn stones, and 1 row of new wood of that country, and expenses thereof to be given out of the house of King Cyrus. Right? So once again, when we get back to Kings, we get into that chapter in Solomon, namely First Kings chapter 6, going into chapter 7. We'll get these dimensions again for the first time when Solomon first built the temple. Right? So just try to imagine in your mind's eye a cubit being a foot and a half or half a yard, 18 inches. Right? So kind of have an idea for scale. When you think about it in your mind, if you're like trying to picture how big the temple was, just know the units and kind of have an idea in your head. Okay, this is how big it would be. 26. And that the holy vessels of the house of the Lord, both of gold and silver, that Nebuchadnezzar took out of the house of Jerusalem, he brought to Babylon, should be restored to the house of Jerusalem and be set in the place where they were before. And also he commanded that Sisines, remember that's Tatnai, that's his other name, the governor of Syria and Phoenice, and Sathrabasanes, right, who was the Shether Boznai, right? That's the way you say his name the other way. And their companions, and those which were appointed rulers in Syria and Phoenice, should be careful not to meddle with the place, but suffer Zerubbabel, the servant of the Lord, and governor of Judea, and the elders of the Jews, to build the house of the Lord in that place, right? Which you guys obviously did the opposite, right? 28. I have commanded also to have it built up whole again, and that they look diligently to help those that be of the captivity of the Jews, till the house of the Lord be finished. And out of the tribute of Celesyria and Phoenice, a portion carefully to be given these men, for the sacrifice of the Lord, that is, to Zerubbabel the governor, for bullocks and rams and lambs. And also, check this out, corn, salt, wine, oil, and that continually every year, without further question, according as the priest that be in Jerusalem should signify, to be daily spent. So I like this here. I want to get a link real quick because this makes you think of when we read about the scriptures, how they talk about the essential things for life, right? We have one verse kind of deals with like, the general thing, but then it goes specific as far as principal things for our use. And you'll see that the list that it goes into, we see some of these items here, was pretty much all the essential things that we would need as a nation and that we had, say, when we were in the wilderness and first going to set up the land, right? Where if you need to look at the modern society and go, okay, how much is essential versus how much is superfluous or more than necessary? What are the bare necessities that we need to really function as a civilization, as a society? And we can look right to the model that we have in the first 5 books as far as us in different tribes moving through tents, and you have in the main group in the middle, which is the Levites, and then you have the sons of Aaron in the center with the tabernacle, the congregation, and all the tools they needed to do their job as far as the different offerings, right? The different raw materials they needed. So if the law was a cookbook, this would be like the ingredients, right? So let's get this link to link with chapter 6 and verse 30. Let's get Ezra in the 66 books, chapter 6 and verse 9 to go with Ezra 6 and 30. So Ezra chapter 6 and verse 9, it says, and that which, once again, Ezra chapter 6, verse 9, and that which they have need of, both young bullocks and rams and lambs for the burnt offerings of the God of heaven, wheat, salt, wine, oil, according to the appointment of the priests which are at Jerusalem, let it be given them day by day without fail. Right? So we could do the burnt offerings morning and evening, the offering for the Sabbath, the offering for the new moon, and the offering for the holy days. Right? You guys can just, to get it, just write down Numbers 28 and 29, those chapters as a whole, go into the specific offerings that were to be done at different times, right? As far as daily, weekly, monthly, and every season when we had holy days. Also, Leviticus chapters 1 through 7 specifically go into like the recipes pretty much for each offering that we did. Where you go to Numbers 28 and 29, it goes into how many of each offering, right? So as long as you do the burnt offering, you know, okay, if we have to do this many, we just got to do one, right? So now I have to do this many for the new moon, or this many for the tabernacle, right, et cetera, a piece of tabernacles, et cetera, et cetera.
And these things comes out of price, right? And that's why the king ordered or commanded those governors in those regions to steer clear of the work that Zerubbabel and the peoples of the Most High had to do, right? And the price would be coming from their budget, right? They would have to arrange in their budget to finance these things that we got to do. Consider that's why I said without fail, because they cannot stop that budget. That budget has to continue and renew year over year, year over year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's kind of reminiscent of the reparations argument, right? That we see it's been happening in America. We see it's starting to take a little, starting to catch a little more momentum now, as far as drawing, measuring for inflation and all the damages done. What it would cost to, really restore what was done to our people here in America, right? It's reminiscent of that, right? Because what they're giving us is really ours anyway, right? As far as the oil, the wheat, the flour, right? Before the captivity began. Because Nebuchadnezzar took it, Cyrus took Nebuchadnezzar. Now Cyrus is what? Using what he took from him as the Most High instructed him to now provide back to us to set ourselves back up while he does his thing as far as the other nations, since he's the top ruler. That's why I said he's a rare find amongst kings throughout the history of kings of these other nations, right? To even do that much. But this is Ecclesiasticus, which going into like I was talking about the bare necessities, the bare essentials. Like when we talk about cooking, right? The recipe, we talk about the ingredients that we need. Or if you're talking about, say, like fixing things, right? Like doing repairs of, different mechanical things or electronics. They always say, parts and labor. You always want to ask the person, what's the parts and labor, right? You look at the cookbook, you will look at, okay, what's the recipe? And then what's the ingredients and what's the recipe, which pretty much tells you how to take the ingredients and what sequence and how long to cook what and when to mix this and when to take this out of the oven, put in the oven, put on a skillet, take off the skillet, right? It's yeah, pretty much a cookbook, metaphoric wise.
What we reading here in this right here, this was more so for the to keep the operation, the holy operation of the Most High going, as opposed to the whole population of Israel that was in the land. So this is just to keep the priesthood and the operation of running the temple and the governance of how we do things, keep it functional. So these things were to be provided, for that purpose, to keep things going, and also for the priests and their family to keep the operation going, so that they can serve the people according to how the Most High, want to be served. Want them to serve and educate the people.
Right. So this is Ecclesiasticus 29 and 21, where it says, once again, Ecclesiasticus 29 and 21, it says, the chief thing for life is water and bread and clothing and a house to cover shame. So that's the scripture we always go to show what they say in the world, food, clothing, and shelter, right? Which is, you look at your civilization, whether it be ancient or modern, right? You always need these, right? It's just a matter of what system you decide to use to provide for these things. And then when it goes more specific into the principal ingredients and the things that we need for functionally, and when you look at this list, you can parallel it to the priests. This is Ecclesiasticus 39. Ecclesiasticus chapter 39 and verse 26. Once again, Ecclesiasticus 39 and 26, which reads, the principal thing for the whole use of man's life are water, fire, iron, and salt, flour of wheat, honey, milk, blood of the grape, oil, and clothing. Right? So now the priests are kind of like the template, but now this actually would, fan out to even what regular folks would use in their day-to-day life as well, but we know it's essential for the priests, which we can kind of look at as like a franchise, if you will, like a franchise model, which, if you didn't know that already, the whole concept of a business franchise that has, like you were touching on, Kahan, daily operation requirements, right, to run it day by day. It got its model from the scriptures, namely from how the priests were to function and the Levites in general, right, as far as in their different cities. And when it came to even Jerusalem, the capital city, right, the Catholic Church got its model from the order of the sons of Aaron, the priests, and the franchise model got its structure from the Catholic Church, as far as them setting up the archdioceses and smaller dioceses, they all kind of like smaller hubs, smaller versions of what's supposed to be their central hub, which is the Catholic Church. A lot of folks won't take it as far back as Aaron and the Levites, but we do. And if you really do your research, you'll see that. But usually folks will say, "Oh, the Catholic Church," and I consider that the Catholic Church is bit off of us and our people. So yeah, these things are essential for a priest, right? For them to do all the necessary offerings that will need to be done. Like we talk about in Numbers 28 and 29, as far as the morning eating sacrifices, Sabbath day sacrifice, new moon sacrifice, and all the different holy days. But yeah, like I said, just remember those if you want to get into those details. Numbers 28 and 29, as well as Leviticus 1 through 7, right? That's where all the recipes are, all the parts and labor, if you will. Okay, so back in First Esdras 6, let's read on in verse 31. First Esdras 6 and 31, it says, move my bookmark. Oops. Here we go. It says that offerings may be made to the Most High God for the king and for his children, and that they may pray for their lives. And he commanded that whosoever should transgress, yea, to make light of anything afore spoken or written, out of his own house should a tree be taken, and he thereon should be hanged, and all his goods seized for the king. So, how about this for not interfering with the progress of the Israelites? You know, imagine if once this was read, the law was what they call retroactive, where you pass a law and you go backwards to enforce it. His own people, his own cabinet would be in some serious trouble, right? They say, look at what Cyrus did, but then look at you trying to hold them up, trying to get in the way, right? Trying to, be what do you say, like a Karen or a Kevin, right? That's the name they give them now, right? The generic name for them. It could be any nation, but especially it's Esau that goes to an establishment, right? Talking about, I want to speak to the manager. What's going on here? Da, 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 I got a problem with this person, what they said, what they're doing. Here it is. Signed, sealed, delivered. It says in 33, the Lord, therefore, whose name is there called upon, utterly destroy every king and nation that stretcheth out his hand to hinder or and damage that house of the Lord in Jerusalem. I, Darius the king, have ordained that according to these things it be done with diligence. All right, so we got that seal of approval from Cyrus, and now it's been read by Darius and his people. So now they've got the memo, if you will.
Like, so if anyone disobey, you get killed. You get put to death.
So this is a First Esdras 7, right? From 1 down to 5, you can just link Ezra in the 66 books, chapter 6, verses 13 to 15. That's what parallels we're about to read now. 6, 13 to 15 of Ezra goes with First Esdras 7, 1 to 5.
So in verse 32, that's a death penalty right there. If you mess with that, it's a death penalty.
Yeah.
Verse 32. If anyone, disobey, not keeping up with uh, offering these things and hindering the operation of what's supposed to happen, what the Levite and supposed to do in Israel and the priest, that's it. It's a death penalty.
Yeah. Serious business and hopefully enforced. Reminiscent of in the modern era makes you think of the Reconstruction era, even though it was short lived. It's an interesting piece of history to check out when you had the United States government actually, uh, after the Civil War ended, in pretty much employing the Union soldiers uh, in places where we moved to after leaving the plantation to protect us, to not molest us, so that we could actually build our own towns, build up our own communities, set up our own businesses, run for office, right? Different levels to where you had some serious prosperity, even though under the curse, of course, but some serious prosperity over a short period of time during that Reconstruction era until they ended it, right? After they brought a new president in, and then they started pushing what they call black codes, which is like your Jim Crow laws, where pretty much at the Reconstruction ended, it was like a free for all, right? At least if they tried to do it during Reconstruction, they would get, like we read here, punishment, if not, some kind of court martialing or what have you, whatever the punishment might be. But once Reconstruction ended, it just pretty much was there's no other way of putting it. Domestic terrorism waged against our people, right? We were still building things, but they would do like hit and run tactics. Set up, they instituted sundown towns. They came up with these laws that were just totally unjust. Like, you know, they'll arrest you for like the smallest thing. Like cross the street at a certain time, uh, hang you if you're out at a certain time, even if you're coming from work. It would just be like that kind of thing, where you just live in a constant state of terror, not sure when they're coming for you or coming for your family. So, when people talk about America and talk about terrorism and this, that, and the third, it's just like, you know, had a Malcolm quote that he said, "The chicken's coming home to roost." It's like you want to fight this war on terror, so to speak, but you've been waging terror on Israel, either since you got here or since you brought us here, because some of us were already here in America before they came, and some of us they brought over from Europe and parts of Africa, right? But you that's been your policy. It's been terror, right, to maintain control. But then you lie and say it's about democracy, and you know you want to make Indians and 3/5 into citizens, but not treat them as such.
Right.
So can you be mad when the thing comes back around on you?
Yeah, they talking about, police brutality against blacks, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a way to end police brutality against blacks. If they found that a police killed a black man and he found, do it unjustly, you get put to death. There you go. You're done with, black, police shooting us, unjustly in the
Wow.
street. That would be it. That's
Wow.
right here.
A miracle, right? We look at that as a miracle. But it's just like, is that really a miracle? Or is that just business being taken care of? Don't the Proverbs talk about that? As a man of a ruler is, so are his officers, right? And anyone has worked in an organization, especially like a multi-tier organization, like a corporation of sorts, or it doesn't have to be a corporation, it could be a public sector or a nonprofit sector as well. You already know, just working in that environment, if there's like an idea or a certain practice that they want to institute as far as the organization, unless it's embraced by the top brass and it's like being enforced, you see them like embracing it, it's only going to be like, maybe a group here doing it. But unless somebody that's like above them really cares, it's not going to get done. It's going to be a flavor of the month. Whereas if everybody that's part of the program manager level and up, top leadership of the company, organization does it, it's just going to be, it's going to be like just one offs here and there.
when you have different states have governors, that run that state, and they can make decision that the federal cannot interfere. You got a problem. And
Right.
that's why and even in the very setup of America, it's a setup.
Right.
Right? Because of course you have executive order, but still it's it got to go to Congress, and the representative of each state got to still say, nah, we're not gonna uphold this in our state.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
But here, he said once he gets the seal of approval as a king, then everybody got to abide by it. So that's why the form of government that they have today is not a kingdom per se, because they don't apply the principles that a kingdom should be about. Right? And a man that mess up in this situation here, a beam would be taken out of his own house, and it would be hanged on that same beam, and then all his possession will be taken by the king.
Was it in the Constitution a right to a speedy trial? Right? I mean, it's not going to be something that's going to hang up for months on end.
Right.
Cost some tax dollars, right? Handle that thing within, a week's time, right? If not sooner. Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed. Simple solutions to complex problems, right? I put complex in air quotes. But this is First Esdras chapter 7, right? Once again, 1 through 5 links with Ezra chapter 6, 5, 13 through 15. I'm going to read here in First Esdras 7. It says, Then Sosthenes, the governor of Celesyria and Phoenice, and Sathrabasanes with their companions, following the commandments of King Darius, did carefully oversee the holy works, assisting the ancients of the Jews and governors of the temple. So they're on watch, right? They're walking on eggshells at this point, right? They want to make sure that they're on the right side of this judgment, right? Otherwise, like you said, they're going to be, as Billie Holiday said in her famous song, right? Strange fruit hanging on a tree, right? It says, and so the holy works prospered when Aegeus and Zacharias the prophets prophesied, right? We can go back to Haggai and Zechariah and read those. And I read the introductions to those books, but those books go into some of the things that they took note of and prophesied on during this time. It says in verse 4, and they finished these things by the commandment of the Lord God of Israel, and with the consent of Cyrus, Darius, and Artaxerxes, kings of Persia. See, I like the way they frame that, right? They finished these things by the commandment of the Lord God of Israel, because from Cyrus to Darius, they're writing what? I say this to be done, but because the Most High wants this done, right? So, like I said, you don't really see this a lot of times with the heathen rulers, even mentioning the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They may mention a God, but not the true and living God. So this is a very interesting situation to really meditate on. Verse 5, and thus was the holy house finished in the 23rd day of the month of Adar, if you know it was the 12th month, right? We keep Purim. In the 6th year of Darius, king of the Persians, right? So looks like they beat the time for Solomon's temple, right? I think Solomon's temple was like a little over 7 years. They said he started this during the second year of Darius, as they finished in the 6th. So it looks like they shaved about 2 years off, right? Actually, 3 years off. So they got this temple done quick, fast, and in a hurry. It says, yeah, it's good. Not until that one. Verse 6, it says, and the children of Israel, the priests and the Levites and other that were of the captivity that were added unto them, did according to the things written in the books of Moses. And to the dedication of the temple of the Lord, they offered 100 bullocks, 200 rams, 400 lambs, 12 goats for the sin of all Israel, according to the number of the chief of the tribes of Israel. Which you go back and then you'll see where that comes from, right? Those different offerings and how much. It says in verse 9, the priests also and the Levites stood arrayed in their vestments according to their kindreds, in the services of the Lord God of Israel, according to the book of Moses, and the porters at every gate, right? Right, which we had in the wilderness, but then they became expanded and scaled up once we got the temple and actual cities. But based on that framework that we already had in the wilderness, to link with 7 and 9, you can link Ezra in the 66 books, chapter 6 and verse 18, which reads, Ezra chapter 6, verse 18, they set the priests in their divisions and the Levites in their courses for the service of God, which is at Jerusalem, as is written in the book of Moses, right? You guys write these links down also in Numbers, right? This one deals with the sons of Aaron. Numbers chapter 3, 5 to 13. And you can also write down Numbers chapter 8, verses 5 down to 22. They're big sections, but pretty straightforward. But it's going into how to arrange Aaron, but also how to arrange the Levites. How we did it then, and pretty much using that as a model going forward, as we're pretty much rebuilding everything again. To go back to the blueprint on how to do so. Numbers 3 and 5, it says, the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, bring the tribe of Levi near and present them before Aaron the priest, that they may minister unto him. And they shall keep his charge and the charge of the whole congregation before the tabernacle of the congregation to do the service of the tabernacle. And they shall keep all the instruments of the tabernacle of the congregation and the charge of the children of Israel to do the service of the tabernacle. And thou shalt give the Levites unto Aaron and to his sons. They are wholly given to him out of the children of Israel. And thou shalt appoint Aaron and his sons, and they shall wait on their priest's office. And a stranger that cometh nigh shall be put to death, because it only pertains to them. And it says, and Yahweh spake unto Moses, saying, I behold, I have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel, instead of all the firstborn that openeth the matrix among the children of Israel. Therefore the Levites shall be mine. The Levites will be like their namesake, just like Rebecca named them, joined unto the Lord, right? And she named them joined to the Lord for her own reason, given her relationship with Jacob. But clearly the Spirit was overshadowing her to where that name Levi, which comes from the Hebrew loyal, which means joined, will take on a deeper significance when they will become a tribe, as we see here. So they would be that, they would take on that role of the firstborn that came out of everyone of Israel, be it man or beast. So they will be that nation that served that purpose going forward. It says in 13, because all the firstborn are mine, from the day that I smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, I hallowed unto me all the firstborn in Israel, both man and beast, mine they shall be. I am Yahweh. Right? Kind of like a reversal to where the Most High, we read this in Passover, right? The Most High killed their firstborn. Whereas with us, he wanted to save and keep our firstborn, nine to him and bless him. You read Exodus 13. So now he has a tribe, Levi, that he had be to pretty much serve that function going forward after that, because they had no inheritance, but a tenth that Israel made would go to them as an inheritance, as they were giving it to the Most High, by giving it to them to do the service of the Most High. So this is all very important as we're rebuilding the temple and getting set back up in the land. And then Numbers chapter 8 as well. You can write down 5 down to 22. You can read that as well. Go along with what we read in Numbers 3, 5 to 13. This is First Esdras chapter 7. Now I'm in verse 10. It says, the children of Israel that were of the captivity held the Passover the 14th day of the first month, after that the priests and the Levites were sanctified. Right? So after they did those things we mentioned, we read and mentioned in Numbers, right? When the time came around for the Passover, they would keep that, right? Because like we said, we're back in Israel, which means back to business as usual. We'll try to keep it in our captivity, of course, just like we're doing now in the Western countries, mainly throughout the Americas, which is where most of our people are found, even though we're scattered throughout the four corners. We try our best to keep the Passover, but now in this case, we're back in the land, so we can keep it and really keep it right. I know we all look forward to that. Us and other branches of Christ that are out there waking up to this truth look forward to keeping the Passover and the other holy days back in our homeland again, right? And doing it when we have it set up under our authority, not like going there now where you got the Israeli and the Palestinians there making a mess of things, and we try to keep it. It's not the same as opposed to us actually being in power when we go back there. So imagine that. In the future, we won't have to imagine it. We'll actually do it. It says in verse 11, they that were of the captivity were not all sanctified together, but the Levites were all sanctified together. And so they offered the Passover for all of them of the captivity, and for their brethren the priests, and for themselves. So, first things first, right? We got to handle the priests, because if the priests aren't set up right, how can we get the people right? Right? It's like a trickle down. Anytime we go into the Kings of Chronicles, as we're going to go to the Sabbath services, you'll see when we have a chain of wicked kings, right? Once a righteous king comes on the scene, that's usually his first order of business. Like when Hezekiah, for example, came on the scene, that was his first order of business, to where the kings that came before him had just fallen from the way, right? Some things they did they were on point, and other things they did they weren't on point. But what Hezekiah did, we read about his story, he had to get the priests set up again, to where I think in one instance they mentioned how they had to pass on a month to keep the Passover, because the priests were in such disarray because of his father, who was king before, that was dealing with wickedness. He said, you know what? This month, let me focus on making sure the priests are on point, get them cleansed, so that when we come to the second month and the 15th day, the priests will be arranged properly and cleansed properly, so they can keep a sound, correct Passover for the nation, right? So he said, you know what? Let me not even just rush it. Let me make sure the priests are on point first. Then we can keep the Passover. So they kept the Passover in the second month that year. That you read about going back to Hezekiah. I'm just thinking about as like an example, similar to what we're reading here. It says in verse 13, and the children of Israel that came out of the captivity did eat, even all they that had separated themselves from the abominations of the people of the land, and sought the Lord. So we're getting our acts together. We're cleaning up our acts. We're getting right with the Most High. And they kept the feast of unleavened bread 7 days, making merry before the Lord, for that he had turned the counsel of the king of Assyria towards them, to strengthen their hands in the works of the Lord God of Israel. Right? So, going forward, we're going to be making improvements, right? Getting better, but not without any, temptation to regress, right? Because we read that not only here when we're reading, we read it also in Ezra and Nehemiah, where as we're going back into the land to get things right, you also find instances where some of us have picked up and held on to some bad habits that we learned from the heathen. And we see how our leadership dealt with that, like Ezra, like Nehemiah, right? So we'll read that too as we go forward in this history, not only in the Apocrypha, but also in the Old Testament as well. But here we'll make an end. That's first Ezra 6 and 7. No, for next week which is going to be the 20th, we're back in the Old Testament, 2 Samuel again. We're going to read chapters 17 and 18. Once again, 2 Samuel 17 and 18 for next week. Also, before we get to the Sabbath service of next week, know that the third new moon is going to be Thursday, May 18th, 2023, right? So the next Thursday at sundown is going to be third new moon. So keep that in your radar as well. I'll send out a text message usually a couple days before, just as a reminder. But yeah, put down your calendar first. That next Thursday is a new moon, third new moon, and the next Sabbath, 2 Samuel 17 and 18. Let me put that down in my notes. I forgot that part about the Sabbath. 2 Samuel 17 and 18 next week. Oh, and since I got you guys on the live stream, just for those that are watching today, let me just show you this too. I'll share real quick the screen. But I know the email you guys got the email for the holy days and the new moons for 2023 to 2024. I'm finishing up the ones for the go 2025, and I'm working on the ones for 2026 and sending those out too. As the weeks go by, just that we're further ahead of the curve, and then we can also talk things out with other camps when it comes to possibly keeping holy days together. Now, I know when it comes to the Feast of First Fruits, it's kind of a hot topic on how to do it. So, just to show you guys at least what we're doing here, similar to how we use the United States Naval Observatory, you can go on there and pretty much look up new moons and base it on whatever zip code you want. We can pretty much look up new moons and go into the future and see when they come in. And then since we do it for New York, we set it for New York City and just figure out when the sundown is in that region to say, okay, this is the time that we agree upon to keep the new moon, right? When it comes to the Feast of First Fruits, we found a way to pretty much, or a website where just like they keep track of the lunar cycles and the sun cycles, they actually keep track of agriculture in North America on a website pretty much called the short version is nass.usda.gov. But what I'll do is I'll copy and paste the site that's on there. We can actually go directly to the articles, and I'll just share it real quick. So I'll copy and paste it in the chat. And happy Sabbath to you too. No sleep. I see you here in the chat. And I was kind of glued to the scriptures here in my notes. But I just posted the link if you guys want to go here. This is just what I'm using. And let me share it real quick. Just do this demonstration real quick before we do the closing prayers. Let's see, present, share screen. And I want to share, this one. So link that I posted in the chat. This is what you guys can see right now. Add to stream. Okay, there we go. So the link I posted, this is the website. You can get the, like I said, you can get this website by going to the PAN website, which is nass.usda.gov. NASS stands for, as you can see here, National Agricultural Statistics Service. USDA stands for Department of Agriculture. So as I scroll down, what you'll see here, every Monday at 4 p.m., they pretty much release crop reports for all different things that are grown in North America. So we see the latest one that they have is May 8th. So by the time the 15th comes around, the May 15th around 4 p.m., they'll have another report here. I'll pull up the PDF ones. It's a little easier to look at. And let me share that one next so you guys can see that. share this tab instead. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in so you guys can see. So I click the May 8th report, right? And I zoom in. Just do Control plus to zoom in. And I do Control F. I can find this at the top tab too. And I put in winter wheat. I want to find winter wheat. Get to it quickly. Just search the word winter wheat and I scroll down. So now what it tells me here is that winter wheat is headed. So you have a couple different crops here as far as what's grown in North America. This is winter wheat headed. And to select the states, pretty much these states here on the left are the states that are known for growing the most when it comes to winter wheat. So it's giving me that the progress that the winter wheat is at as a whole, which is headed, which is like the process or the phase of the process that happens right before harvested. Once we go harvested, that's when you want to begin counting. So right now, as you can see, you have last year, which is right here, May 7th, 2022, this report was done. Then you have last week, which was April 30th, 2023. And then you have May 7th, this column, which is a couple of days ago or earlier this week, Monday around 4. And we see we got North Carolina 93% headed. We got a couple that are in the 80 percentile in Arkansas and California. And they do an average between 2018 and 2022. So what we look for every week that this crop report comes out is when we get past headed, when we get enough that are 100%, that we get the first the first harvested report. So you'll see winter wheat harvested, and you'll see 2%, 4%, 6%. You'll see a report that pretty much that shows that. And then once that happens that week, where it goes from headed to harvested, that's when you want to begin counting. Because remember, you always want to do it based on wherever you live. Since we're in North America, I guess it makes sense to do it like this, since we're keeping it based on New York City, at least as far as the time zone. But that's how we're doing it. Like I said, we can talk more about it during the class if folks, are kind of unclear about it. But I just wanted to show you at least the methodology that we're using here when it comes to calculating the time of the first fruits. I had to create a spreadsheet for that too. I shared it, I think, with the Kahanya. I'm not sure if other folks may be interested in seeing it, but I went on their website and pretty much did data from this recent year going back to, I think, like the 90s or 80s to kind of see when harvesting began. And like on average, it was like, I think, the last week of May to like the first week of June. So just even based on, how the crop cycles went over these last like 20 years or so plus, there's never been a time when we would have celebrated the first fruits and not been in the summer months, because we always talk about we want to make sure that we celebrate the holy day in their proper season. So even based on when the winter wheat was harvested, going back 20 plus years, it was always at the earliest it was the middle of May, but in most cases it was either the last week of May or the first week of June. So as a rule of thumb, I just, based on the high holy day calendar I sent you guys already, I just started the third Sabbath in May, just as a rule of thumb, and say, okay, based on that date, that's when we'll count. But as we go along these couple of weeks, I'm gonna keep looking just to make sure that we don't have to push it out further, right? Because it might have to be the fourth week of May or the first week of June, right? The first weekend in June to start counting, depending when the harvest comes in. Well, folks had questions on the chat, right? And everyone's just like, oh, these guys are doing it this day, these guys are doing it that day. Well, why? So, okay, I see what you're saying. Some folks may be bored with that, but that's for the folks that are interested, the folks that want to know. That's how we're doing it, at least. Hey, man, I know everyone's not, minister information. Everyone's not a nerd in Israel, but for the nerds in Israel, that's for you. God bless. For those who care about the details, they're the details.
Yeah, weird people.
All right, 1:00 on the dot. Okay, so we'll say Shar Shabbat. Hopefully you enjoy the rest of your Sabbath day and keep it holding. Continue to watch and pray as we are close to that day when Christ makes his second coming. Thank you for partaking in our Sabbath service with us. I'll say all praise to the Most High in Christ by way of the Holy Spirit. Without them, none of this will be possible. And with that, we'll do the closing prayers. So, Shar Shabbat Yasharala. Let's change this banner down here. What?
I hear you now.
Got jokes. He was up. We were talking, so I don't know. Barak Yahweh ba Hashem Yahushai Asheranathan Now Pari Agapin Twara Aman Laiha ba Hashem Yahushai Af Yashra. What happened? He's like this. He was like this morning. Forget those brothers. Oh man. Am I playing on Jerusalem? Stand and face Jerusalem. Yahweh Basham Yahushai Babakushai Shemai Lanawe Aithed Yam Yan Aithed Shalak Mike Allah Wala Alahayim Tazwadakim Lashma Ayo Barak Rapay Magan Wachaziyak Banya Yash Allah Washalak Lanawe Rabiim Kakamed Rabiim Da'ath Rabiim Bayaned Rabiim Sabalanwa Rabiim Mamawan Rabiim Akwa Rabiim Mahabiim Rabiim Haganed Rakanaye Wasalak Ko Katsayanawe La Akim Wa Akiwa Wayash Aleph Yed Walam Basham Yehoshua for what Haman. English translation, Yahweh. In the name of Yahushai, please listen to us now. Right now, send Michael and the righteous powers to watch over, bless, heal, protect, and make strong the children of Israel. Send to us much wisdom, much knowledge, much understanding, much patience, much faith, much brotherhood, much love, much spiritual protection, and forgive all our sins. For the brothers, sisters in Israel, always and forever, in the name of Yahushua, thank you, so be it. Four corners prayer. Yahweh Basham Yahushua Barak Nawa, Wayash Allah, Wabat Yasapariam, Shema Yashabala, Yahweh, Elohim, Yahweh, Akhe. English translation. Yahweh, in the name of Yahweh Shai, bless us in Israel in the house of books. And then we said, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord. So with that, we'll say a short Shabbat once again. Have a blessed Sabbath. The Most High will talk to everybody in the up and coming week. Let me just post these things at the bottom real quick. Almost forgot. Below is our conference line number. And when we meet, Tuesday and Friday, 7 to 10 p.m., 667-770-1085. And you can listen in or you could watch on the Zoom, which is the link here, Probable Talks. That's the Zoom web link. You just type in that link and then we'll bring you into the chat. And if folks want to make donations, right, or pay tithes, what have you, that's our address, 3826B Germantown Ave, Philly, PA 19140. And the name is spelled the way you see it, right? According to the phonetic Hebrew, as you see there, Hayashra Kanaz. So you want to make sure you put that on your check or money order. And then we have our PayPal, which is paypal.me/HYK12 if you want to do it online for folks who are a bit more savvy, tech savvy. And just remember to like and share the video, Israel. Once again, with that, we'll say Manakah Tawa, which just means good afternoon. Wa Shalom.
Shalom.
Oh, Shalom, brother.
Shalom. Shalom, brother.